Hello and welcome. You are joining a presentation on the past, the present and the future of HACCP. You're now in part 3 about the general principles of food hygiene. Part 2 was about FSSC and ISO 22000 and part 1 was about the food safety bow tie. We're now going for part 3 on the general principles of food hygiene. Here we've got the general principles of food hygiene. This document is in revision now. What I will do in this presentation is we'll discuss if this document is going in the same direction as ISO 22000 did. And I already showed you the relation between ISO 22000 and the food safety bow tie. So the general principles of food hygiene, they're the world standard on food safety. It's made by the Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Health Organization. It's based on, chaired by the United Nations, and countries worldwide use this document to as a foundation for their regulations, like we did in Europe. It's also the basis of the Food Safety Modernization Act in the United States. Just as examples, and also for certification standards like ISO 22000 or BRC or IFS, this will be very much the guiding document. Now we're in a revision process. I've been participating in the revision of ISO. We started in 2014 and we published in 2018, so that took some 4 years. And as a representative for ISO, I'm joining this revision process on the general principles of food hygiene. My seat will be over here, and right here you can find the European Union. Next to European Union is Finland. Here's the representative of Paraguay. There is Kyrgyzstan. Over here you find the delegates from the USA. So basically all countries in the world are represented. Here's the chair, there you have the Food and Agriculture Organization, here's the World Health Organization. So this was the 51st meeting, and I was there in the 49th and the 50th and the 51st. And I will be attending the 52nd as well. And what we are doing in this meeting, next to other things, there's a lot of things going on in this meeting, but part of these things is the revision of the general principles of food hygiene. We're currently working with version 4, which is was published in 2003, and this is version 4. The first version ever was published in 1969. Was the first standard published within the Codex Alimentarius. And it was basically the first 20 pages of the standard as we have it now. In 1993, the HACCP-system was added to these general principles of food hygiene, and it's the last 10 pages of the document. So this is version 4, and we're working now on version 5. And what we're doing in version 5 is we have a better integration of this HACCP part and this, what we call the prerequisite parts, or the good hygiene practices. In the current standard, the HACCP is an annex. In the version 5, the good hygiene practices will be chapter 1 and this will be chapter 2. So we have a better integration of the two approaches. The bridge between this approach of the good hygiene practices and the HACCP is basically in a concept that's called GHPs that require greater attention. And I will explain something about that GHPs. And another major change is the decision tree, which is the decision tree of HACCP, which is this one. This is kind of the holy grail within HACCP. Well, one of the things is that this will be out of the general principles of food hygiene. We won't have a decision tree anymore. Maybe there will be a new one, but it will not be the old one. The old one will be gone. Let's have a look into these GHPs that require greater attention. Basically, the concept is like OPRPs in ISO 22000. Here we've got the GHPs, and here we've got the CCPs. And CCPs are meant to control significant hazards. And the CCPs are specific to a process or a product. These good hygiene practices, they are to ensure a safe environment. They're in the working space in which these processes are taking place and these products are being produced. And they won't deal with specific hazards. But there might be cases that GHPs deal with specific hazards, and in that case we would call that GHP a GHP that require greater attention. So these type of GHPs are sort of in between GHPs and CCPs. When we talk about validation here for CCPs will be necessary, with GHPs whenever applicable. Criteria for CCPs will be measurable or observable, just like at GHPs, but here we'll have critical limits, and that's really to divide unacceptable food from acceptable food. With CCPs, whenever we have a deviation, we'll have unsafe food. That's the concept of a CCP. With GHPs, a deviation will not necessarily lead to unsafe food. You will have to have an evaluation. Whenever there's a deviation, you will evaluate the impact on safety or suitability of that food product. So it's a bit of case-by-case approach. The monitoring for CCPs shall ensure that critical limits are met. And this monitoring should therefore be continuously or at least at an appropriate frequency. Here with the GHPs, you'll do monitoring as appropriate or when necessary. But typically the frequency of that monitoring will be related to the impact on safety and suitability of the food. When we come to corrective actions, in case of CCPs, we must make sure that the unsafe food does not reach the consumer. So we'll have, whenever there's a deviation, we'll have a predetermined action. It's not a case by case, it's defined. You have to make sure that that action will take place. For GHPs, it will be a case by case situation. Whenever there's a deviation, usually you will not have a corrective action towards the product, but there might be cases that you have to make sure that this product will not go to the consumer. So there's a difference, and the last one is about verification. Verification is necessary over here, and again with GHPs it's where appropriate and necessary. So that's what will be in the new version of the General Principles of Food Hygiene. Now, as a summary of all the 3 presentations that I've done on the past, the present, and the future of HACCP. There's a couple of things I'd like to say. First, the food safety bow tie made us clear on primary, secondary, and tertiary levels of control. And that's a key in the understanding of HACCP. You have to control hazards, but you also have to control deviations. And that's what ISO 22000 does. We make that distinction. And another thing that we learned about the food safety bow tie and HACCP, that HACCP is very much a language problem. It's not that food business operators do not understand their problems in food safety. It's just that they don't have the words to really talk about it very precisely. So it's a matter of how do you reason in cases of safe or unsafe food. How do you find the proper words? How do you find the right arguments to make clear that your product is safe? So it's very much a language problem, and we can avoid that language problem by using the food safety bow tie. And so I think that the food safety bow tie has a promising future. It's also promising because this bow tie approach is used in many other types of risk management. So for food safety people to be compatible to that kind of developments in risk assessment, risk management, it would be wise to also understand food safety bow tie. These bow tie approaches are used in aviation, in offshore technology, oil industry, even in hospitals they use bow tie approaches. So let's use bow tie as an approach also for food safety. So the new codex, there's a concept of GHPs that require greater attention. They look like OPRPs in ISO 22000, but for ISO 22000 has a more clear approach on the identification and the control of these OPRPs or GHPs that require greater attention. So this new codex will have consequences for ISO 22000, but limited. We're basically on the same track. Standards like BRC and IFS that are also based on Codex will need to do some work to introduce this new concept, and that work will not be minor. And food law needs to be adjusted. For the European Union, I know they already worked on documents, they published documents that also related to ISO 22000, so they're kind of doing the work already. For the Food Safety Modernization Act in the United States, they have a concept of preventative controls, which look a lot like OPRPs or GHPs. So the Food Safety Modernization Act is also heading in that direction. So they already did some of the work, but there will still be work to be done. So this is the summary to end the 3 presentations on the past, the present and the future of HACCP. And the question is very much, are we heading in the same direction? And basically we are heading in the same direction. ISO 22000 is an industry standard, and industry needs to improve, wants to go on and have better systems. So ISO is well on its way. I think that in terms of precision, there's still things to gain in ISO 22000 in relation to the food safety bow tie. This has an awful lot of precision, and there's some things to gain over here. The general principles of food hygiene, they're not an industry standard. This is the standard for our governments, and this is a standard that needs to be applied throughout all of the food chain. So this is well-established industry, but this is also catering and agriculture practices and the smaller food business operators. So this needs to be used by each and every one. So it cannot be as complicated or as how do you find advanced like the ISO 22000 standard. But with some differences, we are heading in the same direction. For the future of HACCP, I've got another 10 years to go, and I think there's still a lot of work to do. I will spend the next 10 years on promoting this food safety bow tie approach, as I've done in the last couple of years within ISO and General Principles of Food Hygiene. So, thank you very much for joining the presentation, and hope you found some things worthwhile. Thanks a lot.